And as usual, first and foremost, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves of how extremely fortunate we are to be students of the great Master, He who is the perfect one, the awakened one, the invincible one, the one who knows, the one who has cleared the path for us, the path to our deliverance, the path to our salvation, the path to our liberation, reminding ourselves of the greatness of our Master, acknowledging that we are His students, and to make our allegiance as disciples of the supremely enlightened Buddha. Let us commence today's sermon by reciting the Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa stanza, which will appear on screen in just a moment. Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa Pabhinna Kilasa Vijita Vijayasa Anighasa Susamachittasya Buddhasilasya Sadhupanyasya Vesantarasya Vimalasya Bhagavatotasya Savakohamasmi Akatankatisya Tusitasya Vantalokamisasya Muditasya Katasamanasya Manujasya Antima Sarirasya Narasya Anopamasya Virajasya Bhagavatotasya Savakohamasmi Akatankatisya Tusitasya Vantalokamisasya Muditasya Katasamanasya Manujasya Antima Sarirasya Narasya Anopamasya Virajasya Bhagavatotasya Savakohamasmi Namo Tasya Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Now to observe the precepts and seek refuge in the Noble Triple Gem, please recite all together and after me. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tathiyampi sanghang saranam gacchami. Saranaгаmanang sampunnam. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinnādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kāmesu micchāchārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapama datthāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Tisaranena saddhiṃ pañcasīlaṃ dhammaṃ sādukhaṃ surakkhitāṃ kattvā appamādena sampādeta. Okay, you may all now be seated. And as usual, before we commence the sermon, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves that it remains our duty and our obligation to serve those who have served us in this long journey that we have come through in samsara. Countless beings will have come to our help, support and assistance in the most desperate of times. But unfortunately, perhaps among them will be those who are today born in woeful plains, unable to fend for themselves, and lost and destitute in samsara. As grateful beings, we must remind ourselves that it is our duty and obligation to help them and support them and assist them, as they once did for us. So as we embark on this journey to make efforts to redeem ourselves from the universal suffering of existence, let us take a moment to extend this opportunity to all those beings. Let us take an opportunity to invite them to join us and witness this meritorious deed as it unfolds. For all those beings in the woeful plains, may they witness this meritorious deed, and may they acquire merits, and may such merits help them to redeem themselves from the woeful plains and be born in the blissful plane. And for all beings who are already in the blissful plane, or having been born there, may they be able to listen to the teaching of the Buddha, understand it, comprehend it. May they be able to remain vigilant and alert throughout this sermon, in the hope that they be able to understand and comprehend the truth that was expounded by the Buddha himself, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With those compassionate thoughts extending out to all such beings in these 10,000 world systems, wherever they may be today, in whatever capacity they might have helped, supported and assisted you in this journey in samsara, as I now make this invitation, I ask you all to extend that invitation out to them, invite them to join us, invite them to witness this meritorious deed and acquire merits, and rejoice in them, and invite them to listen to the teaching of the Buddha and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta cakkavalesu atra gacchantu devata saddhammang munirajassa sunantu sagga mokkadam Dhamma savana kalo ayam bhadanta Dhammasavana kalu ayam bhadanta Dhammasavana kalu ayam bhadanta. And also, before we commence the sermon today, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from the Noble Triple Gem as well as the Noble Ones for any thoughts, words or actions of slander, insult, revile or desecration that we might have directed towards them, understanding that the consequences of such actions may be that as we attempt to make efforts towards our liberation, those efforts are hindered and it becomes extremely difficult for us to understand the Dhamma. So for any thoughts, words or actions, either deliberate or by accident, in this long journey in samsara that we might have directed towards the Noble Triple Gem, as well as the Samma Sambuddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagamis, Sakradagamis, Sotapannas, be they on the path of having attained the fruits, as well as the Sambuddha Shasana, the Buddha's ministry. Take a moment to seek their forgiveness, and as you do so, make a firm resolve to never conduct yourself in such manner, and may that forgiveness enable you, help you, and support you to complete your journey towards the liberation of samsara. And let us make one final resolve made through the course of this sermon. If there are those among you who are yet to achieve the noble state of Sotapanna, may this sermon help you do so. May those gaps in your understanding, in your knowledge and your comprehension be fulfilled. And for any among you who have already achieved the noble state of Sotapanna, may through the course of this sermon you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With that resolve in your hearts and minds, I invite you excuse me, I invite you to prepare yourselves to listen to this sermon. Excuse me. I hope you are taking the time through the week to follow the things that we advise and recommend you do. It is essential for your practice that you do so. Unfortunately, from time to time we get to meet people who sometimes stay behind after sermons, or perhaps visit us, or perhaps send us messages and post their questions. And when we study these questions that come through them, I don't mean each and every one of them, but I'm saying there is a distinction between those who follow the path and those who say they follow the path. It is very evident, it's very obvious. So for those people who bring their complaints, their moans and their gripes and their vexations, what is evident to us very soon after having a brief conversation with them is that most of them who feel that they're not making progress, who feel that their progress is very slow or none at all, are those who don't actually do the things that we ask them to do. What sort of things? Well, you remember from our very early sermons, I asked you to take some time out on a daily basis and reflect on the Dhamma. I asked you to start it off with a 15-minute meditation session. I know among you are those who actually do it religiously, and that is very commendable. But also among those are those who don't really. I can, but I don't. And then some other bits of advice were, go back and listen to some of the sermons. There are those who do, and there are those who don't. So therefore there are always going to be winners and losers in this game. Plenty of Buddhas have come and gone, and plenty will in future. So of course, as Guru Swami always reminds me, don't be greedy, we must always leave some for the following Buddhas. We mustn't take them all with us. Otherwise, the next Buddhas that come along will have to just sit around wondering, what did I come here to do after all, when there's no one left to save. So I invite some of you to stick around. Give our regards to the Maitri Buddha. Please make our venerations to him on our behalf, and for that we will be forever grateful to you. But it's simply those who do and those who don't. I'm being critical indeed, and that is because I think if you can all make effort, if you can all make time and make a resolve that you want to get something out of this, the time that you put into these sermons, I don't think any of you will sit along or come to the sermons, attend the sermons, because you have nothing better to do on a Sunday afternoon. I strongly doubt that. I also doubt that there are those among you who listen to these sermons to find faults in them. And I'm also hoping that there aren't those of you who listen to these sermons so that you can promote them to others, advertise them to others. Oh, hey, there's this part of the sermon that I think you should listen to, it's really interesting. What we end up then is with a bunch of portilers, those who make it their purpose to pass on the Dhamma without putting it into practice. So these are the people who will stay behind for the Maitri Buddha. And not that there's anything against them we have, but if that is not your wish, if that is not your resolve, then I ask you to get your act in order. Results are left for those who take action. Fruits are there for those who labor, not for those who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. Are you one of them? Honestly, hand on heart, can you swear to yourself? Can you promise? Are you able to take an oath that you follow the things that we ask you to do to the best of your ability? I will remind you of these things from time to time, almost regularly. I don't know why they come into my mind, but I just feel like I need to mention them. Sometimes I think to myself at the start of the sermon, I should probably, or as I prepare for a Sunday, as Sunday comes along, I should probably start to talk about this, that and the other, and then as I sit down and start to make the sermon, it's a very different agenda that starts to flow through my mind. I don't know why that is. I think you do. So, this is a wake-up call for those of you who talk the talk but don't walk the walk, because no amount of talking is going to see you through the suffering of samsara. It's taking action, it's putting knowledge into power, it's putting knowledge into action that reaps results and rewards. So, the long and short of it is, the Maitri Buddha will most certainly come along. I leave it to you whether you want to stick around to say hello, or you want to bid your farewell and say your goodbyes now that we already have the Gautama Buddha's dispensation. So that's a bit of stern, I suppose, advice at the start of the sermon. And after all, there are still a few people who come along to the sermon, so it must be that they still need the guidance and advice. I am keen on you practicing the path, folks, because I know how much I am able to lighten the load, free myself and enjoy a bliss that I have never been able to experience prior to practicing the Dhamma. So if you want to achieve those results, then you need to put this into practice. I'm going to ask you if you can remember what we discussed in one of the previous sermons the previous sermon's titled, Who's on the Chair? Did you go back and listen to that sermon? I did ask you a couple of times. Well done you if you have. We will continue that discussion today. So if you hadn't listened to that sermon, you might as well drop off now and go back and listen to that sermon, and then come back and listen to this, because you won't understand this if you haven't. What can I do? This is the way it works. I don't make that intentional. It's not a deliberate thing I do. Progress has to be achieved step by step, one step at a time. You can't ask a baby to run until it has to learn to walk. So let's revisit that topic and continue our conversation where we left off. The premise of that sermon and what I was trying to get across to you is to begin to appreciate that there is only suffering to be observed when we talk about existence. Do you remember I mentioned that there are two types of people in this world? Do you remember? There are those who suffer, and there are those who know that they suffer. There isn't anyone who doesn't suffer. There are those who suffer and there are those who know that they suffer, which implies that the first group don't know that they suffer. It's important that we take a moment to observe the world as it really is. When you think about yourself, the person you are, you do this from time to time, I imagine. When you have some spare time and sometimes just close your eyes and just start to think about life, yourself, and the world as it is, and how all things have come into being, and sometimes you wander off into thinking about thoughts of your family, your friends, your workplace, but it always revolves around you. No matter how far it goes, it always comes back. This thought process, I think we're all familiar with. The time we take to think about ourselves. If, for instance, I ask you to think about yourself now, Try and do that for a moment. Think about yourself for a moment. Who are you? You know how you would normally do that when you think about yourself. What sort of feelings, what sort of thoughts, what sort of notions pass through your mind? How do you feel about this person that you feel? You do feel a person, don't you? When you're thinking about yourself, you feel something. You feel, rather than something, you feel someone. Do you not? When you think about you feel someone. But what if I asked you to think about the chair that you're sat on right now? Not about you, but think about the chair that you're sat on right now. Do you feel like you're thinking about someone, or do you feel like you're thinking about something? Do you see that there's a distinction here? We feel very differently about ourselves as to how we feel about the inanimate world out there. Just the world out there. Everything outside of us. We just can't get our heads around, or we can't bring ourselves to think that we are a thing, that I am a thing. What is more natural is to feel that I am a person. I am a who, I am not a what. So who are you? Have you ever given that some thought? Of course you have. When asked at an interview, tell us about yourself. Whether that's a work interview or a job interview, or when you're introducing yourself to somebody. Hi, nice to meet you. Who are you? And then you start to think about yourself, don't you? Most of the time you will begin with your name. Because of course there are some aspects about yourself which are obvious to the person asking the question. The fact that you are human is obvious. The fact that you are either male or female, most of the time is obvious. The fact that you have a particular physique is obvious. What you're clad in, that's obvious. Sometimes the facial expressions, the body language, that's obvious. So clearly you don't need to state that I am, and say a name, and then say I have a body, I have a head, I have eyes, a nose, a tongue. Unlike when we learn that nursery rhyme at school, my head, shoulders, knees and toes, you don't need to introduce yourself that way when you do so to a stranger. What you think they're asking is, who are you? So the name is part and parcel of the who I am. And then there are all the other aspects of the personality that you possess. Your likes and dislikes. These are most of the things that we will share with others. Just think about how you introduce yourself last time you did to somebody or someone. How did you introduce yourself? The last time you introduced yourself to someone? You might have said hello, hi, I am, and you would have said your name. I'd like to, and you would have started to talk about the things, why you're introducing yourself to that person. Perhaps it was on a phone call. Maybe you were ringing up some company or a service provider, and you said, I'm calling you because, so essentially what you're saying is, here's a list of things I want from you. And then sometimes if it's a more intimate acquaintance, so intimacy can have, it's a relative thing, but depending on how intimate you feel towards that other individual, you will share details about your wants and needs. That's normally how a conversation goes. So you'll talk about this is who I am. I am here today because of this. In other words, I'm here because I want something. This is where I live. In other words, this is where I probably like to live. This is where I work. In other words, this is where I probably like to work. It may be that today you don't like to work there or live there, but at some point that is where you decided that you would like to spend a part of your life in. You made a choice. And then you will go on to talk about your family. You'll talk about your husband or your wife, you'll talk about your children, you might even talk about your friends. You'll then probably move on to talk about your hobbies, things you like to do in your spare time. This is how you introduce yourself, isn't it? Your introduction, in other words, you to another person is a bunch of likes and dislikes with a label to go on top of it, and that label being your name. If you took away all the likes and dislikes about your best friend, just consider that for a moment. Think about your best friend for a moment, whoever that might be. Hopefully you have a friend. So think about that friend for a moment. Now, when you talk about that friend, when you think about that friend, what comes to mind? Once we've moved past the obvious features and characteristics, chances are that's not necessarily why you became their friend. Not because they're human, not because they're male or female. Maybe partly so, but that probably wouldn't have been the deciding factor. It's probably not because they have a head and shoulders and arms and knees and toes. And it's also probably not because they had a name, because everyone's got that. So why you chose your friend among so many other potential options is an interesting question to ponder, because you might think, well, it's a lot of information about my friend. Actually, your choice of friend says a lot about you. That's why it's an interesting question to ponder. The 5 people you spend most of your time with determines over 90% of your characteristics. Show me your 5 best friends and I'll tell you who you are. I'll tell you about yourself. Tell me about the things that the 5 best friends, the people you spend most of your time with, do, and I'll tell you what you do most of your time. Tell me the things that they like and I'll tell you what you like. Tell me what they don't like and I'll tell you what you don't like. Tell me who they like to hang around with or where they like to hang around, and I'll tell you the same about yourself. So it's interesting to study others, or particularly the friends, because I suppose family, you don't get to pick your family, right? You do, but for the sake of this argument, for the sake of this conversation, we will leave it at you don't get to pick your family, but actually you do. Or is that the first thing you want to talk about? So that you don't make the same wrong choice again. We'll come back to that later. But your friends and the people that you made relationships with after your arrival, which we talked about last week, the splendidness of your arrival. So after the friends you associate and the acquaintances you get into, the people you begin to associate that are outside your immediate family, actually they speak volumes about the type of person, the kind of person you are. Most of the time we find it difficult to study ourselves. The study of oneself is probably the most challenging of all studies. That is why once you have mastered that art, you get to be called the perfect one. Once you have studied oneself. What we have always learned to do and what we have always enjoyed doing is studying others. But what I'm saying is, you don't need to all of a sudden change tact. You can continue to study others, But what I'm saying is today, why don't we take a moment to study your friends? How often do you actually? I think I asked you to do this some time ago in one of the sermons. You can tell I listen to my sermons. I remember the things I told you. From time to time, to take a piece of paper and write down the names of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with. Family, again, as I say, there's not a lot you can do about. But the rest of them. Who do you hang around with most of the time? Chances are you talk like them. Chances are you walk like them. Chances are your sleeping patterns match theirs. Chances are your interest in the Dhamma is a lot like theirs. When was the last time you did this? A review of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Why is it important to do this? Just to make sure that you're happy with where you are. If you're happy with what you find out at the end of this activity, then great. Kudos to you, hats off. But if you're unhappy about the 5 people you spend most of your time with, what shall we do? Let's all go and ask them to change, right? So, who are the 5 people you spend most of your time with? Take a moment to think about that. The 5 people who you spend most of your time with. What are their characteristics? What are they like? What do they like? What do they dislike? What do other people say about them? Let's not worry about what other people say about you, because really they don't say that to your face, do they? Usually people are very generous with their compliments, but when someone spots a flaw or a fault with you, then they are a little bit more reserved to share that information with you. Isn't that so? Have you not realized that? Yeah, I was wondering with Swami, and no one ever says anything bad about me. I thought I was the perfect one. No, that's not why. It's because they just don't feel comfortable sharing your weaknesses with you. They don't feel comfortable. They don't trust you enough to come and tell you what's wrong with you in your face. That is what it is. It's a trust issue. But anyway, I just wanted to take a moment to think about what are the things that other people say about the 5 people you spend most of your time with. What are they known for? What are they given credit for? What are they discredited for? That's easy to think about, because you're thinking about others. You're thinking about other people. That's what we do most of the time. Do they do 15 minutes meditation every day? Do they keep a timetable? How often do they watch TV? How do they spend their weekends? What are some of the TV programs they like to watch? You will know, because when they talk with you, they'll give you details about the programs that they have watched on TV. Who are their heroes? Who do they praise? What sort of subjects do they like to talk about? Is it fashion? Is it finance, science, or history? Or is it politics? I'm asking you to think about the 5 people you spend most of your time with. What are they like? Hopefully you've got the list of names down now. What are they like? Who are they liked by? Who are they disliked by? Who talks about them a lot of the time and compliments them and says, this is the kind of guy I'd like to hang around with? Who walks out of the room when they walk into the room? The 5 people you spend most of your time with. Are they getting where you want to get to? This is serious stuff, folks. Because the 5 people you spend most of your time with, the way they are, the things they do, the way they talk and the way they walk, the things they like and the things they dislike, will almost certainly be the way you are. This is why I said, show me the 5 people you spend most of your time with, and I'll tell you about yourself. This is a really, really, really good way to figure out why sometimes things don't work out the way you want in your life. If you, for instance, feel sometimes like a failure, look at the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Now you'll know why. If you feel like you're really winning, you're really making good progress, you're achieving success, you've got good aims and goals, and you're a determined person, and you're proud about where you're heading, again, look at the 5 people you're spending most of your time with, and you'll know why. It's been a while probably since you did this, which is why I'm asking you today to take a moment to do that. This is one of the ways you can do a self-review. You want to know about yourself, find out about the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Find out perhaps what their weaknesses are. You probably know them already. Find out what representative of somebody else also. Someone else also. And that one person is you. You're the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. This applies both in terms of physical or actual human beings, people, and also the state of your mind if you consider the 5 that you spend most of your time with. Now I'm talking about the 5 aggregates. If you like to spend most of your time with them, then you will be the way they are. Now I'm talking about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana. You are the way they are. You are because they are. The five that you spend most of your time with. What sort of five do you spend most of your time with? What are they like? If you're vexing most of the time, it's probably because they're vexatious. If you're suffering most of the time, it's probably because they're sufferable. If you feel like you're not getting anywhere in life, and no matter how hard you try, things don't seem to make progress and everything just feels like a means to an end, that's probably because that's the way they are. And guess what? That is the way they are. The five that you spend most of your time with. They define you. What you are right now is the average of the five that's in your mind right now. The five aggregates. This is why I say, take a moment to study them. After all, that's what the Buddha asks us to do. What else is studying oneself, other than studying the nature of your mind and the contents of it? So you can take this as broad or as narrow as you like. For those of you who understand the first way of approaching this, write down the names of the five people that you spend most of your time with and find out about them. What other people talk about them? What noble ones talk about them? And what ignoble people talk about them? That's probably what they talk about you also. Or if you want to take it to the next level, then think about the five that you spend most of your time with. Now this is not people but the aggregates. What goes through your mind at any given time? What are they like? What do the noble ones talk about them? What do ignoble people talk about them? And that's what you are like. That's the nature of your mind right now. This is a self-review. How else would you review yourself? Other than introspectively looking at the state that you're in. After all, what's going through your mind must define your state of mind right now, surely. So what's going through your mind? What goes through your mind? How do the days and weeks pass by? What did you do this morning, by the way? Yes, straight off after you got out of bed. How do you account for the minutes and hours that pass by? What are the things you did? What would noble ones say about the things you did this morning? What would ignoble ones say about the things you did this morning? The Satpurushas and the Asatpurushas, what would they say about how you conducted yourself this morning? The thoughts that went through your mind this morning? In other words, what went through your mind this morning? They define you. So now, if your state of mind is the average of the nature of the five that go through your mind, you know, again I'm talking here about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana, the five aggregates. And if that is what defines you, what is the significance of the rest of what you feel you are, or the who you feel you are when you think about yourself? What is the significance of that? Let me explain what I mean by that. I asked you right at the start of the sermon to take a moment to think about yourself. And then I asked you, when you think about yourself, do you feel that you are a thing, or do you feel that you are a person? So you wouldn't be comfortable to address you as a thing or a what. Rather, you feel about yourself as a who, a person. What we then did is I asked you to think about the five people you spend most of your time with. I explained to you that you could do this at different levels. You can either do it by thinking about the actual five people you spend most of your time with, or the five things you spend most of your time with, in terms of the aggregates that go through your mind constantly. When I asked you, how do you define yourself? How do you introduce yourself? Initially, the thoughts that you would have gone through your head is you would start off with a name, and then you would start to talk about friends, family, hobbies, and essentially the things you like and dislike. What defines who you are is the five that you spend most of your time with. So when you want to introduce yourself then, what is a more appropriate way of introducing yourself? Because if your nature, the nature of your mind, as I said, you're not necessarily introducing your body, right? When someone says, hi, who are you? Of course, we don't talk about our bodies. We're talking about the thing that they cannot see, that is the mind. And the only way they can learn about that is either by spending time with you or by listening to you speak when you talk about yourself. So when you're talking about yourself, what's going through your mind is the five. So when you're defining yourself, what other way is there to define yourself? When you're introducing yourself, what other way is there to introduce yourself than to actually talk about a five, a set of five, or sets of five? When you think about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, do you think about a who or a what? So for instance, if I asked you, what is the nature of Vedana? Would you start to answer that question with, well, Swami answer, he's vexatious, or she's vexatious? Or rather, would you probably say it's vexatious? So now, of course, you're talking about an it. You're talking about a thing here. Then what about Sanya, Sankara or Vijnana? You would never start to talk about it, or introduce it, or describe it by using he or she or I or we. You wouldn't use those pronouns. You're going to be talking about it or they, but again referring to some inanimate things. You're not talking about a person. You're not talking about a personal presence. You're talking about just some things. Just like if I asked you, how big is your house? You wouldn't say, he's 2 stories. You'd say, it's 2 stories, or it's got 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. In much the same way, the same language you'd use to describe Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. But when you introduce yourself to someone, or when I ask you to think about yourself, now all of a sudden you're thinking about someone who's present. You're thinking about a someone or somebody, aren't you? Think about yourself again for a moment. Think within, think about yourself. What are you doing right now? See, when I ask you that question, what are you doing right now? What are you thinking about right now? What are you seeing right now? Do you not almost immediately feel that there's a person that's doing these things? These are all active verbs. Seeing and hearing, or listening rather, smelling and tasting and feeling and being, living, touching. Active verbs. What does active verbs mean? It means there's someone who's doing them. So what are you doing right now? You could say, I'm sitting down, I'm listening to the sermon, I'm standing, or I'm walking, I'm breathing, I'm eating. Hopefully you're not saying I'm sleeping. So when you talk about yourself using these active verbs, honestly, do you not feel like there's someone who's doing them? Okay, what about the person sat next to you? What is it doing? Yes, that was deliberate. Okay, what's he doing then? What's she doing? What's it doing? Oh, it's okay to call your pet dog it. But I think you understand my point here, is whenever we talk about verbs, whenever we talk about active things we do, you feel like you're talking about a person that's doing this. You feel like there's a personal presence. Who did you get married to? He, she, or it? Used to be a he, Swami knows, and now it's an it. You should see him after he's had too much to drink. The its are better, huh? No, but on a serious note, who did you get married to? He or she? Then who did you and your spouse bring into this world? He, she, or it? But one day when they grow up and they have to introduce themselves to someone, or they are introduced to someone by somebody else, chances are again, first things first will be the name, and then you'll move on to the things you like, dislike, hobbies, friends, family. This is a bunch of things we like and dislike. Do you not recall that the first time you gave maybe not the first time, but subsequent times when you talked about myself. First time you spoke of myself, you just said your name and sat down, right? First speech ever. Good old days. I'm talking about the next time. What happened then? Do you remember the times when you were asked to talk about yourself and you kind of didn't know what to talk about, and then you asked someone, maybe your teacher, or perhaps your teacher put on the board a kind of structure to a myself speech. She said, children, you can start with saying by my name is and say your name. Then you can say I am and space years old. Then you can say I come from and where you come from. My best friend is called and his or her name. My favorite sport, my favorite subject, my favorite color, my favorite food, my favorite drink, my favorite pastime or my hobby, the instrument I like to play, and went on and on and on. And thank heavens that's the first speech we learned to do, because even to this day, when you introduce yourself to someone, or actually when you even take a moment to think about who you are, it's a myself speech you're giving at that point in time. You're thinking about the things you like and the things you don't like. So again, I come back to my original question. Who are the 5 people you spend most of your time with? What are the 5 things your mind spends most of its time with? If I can look at the 5 people you spend most of your time with and tell you who you are, and then I can look at the 5 things you spend most of your time with, now I'm talking about the aggregates, and I can tell you who you are, what you're like, everything about you, quite literally everything about you, everything about your personality, everything about the way you think, what you're going to be doing next even. So then after all, what are you? Do you not see how the who are you becomes an unintelligible question? It makes little sense now to be asking, who are you? Because after all, if you introduce yourself by talking about the things you like and you dislike, aren't these things that flow through your mind in terms of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana? Do you remember the sermon Spirits and Possessions? Or is that another one you fell asleep through? Okay, I'm just kidding. So in that sermon, you remember, I spoke of a guy wears a t-shirt, he goes a couple places, and then the question was, can we commend or condemn the shirt or the t-shirt that he wore, depending on where he went wearing it? Is the t-shirt responsible? Can it be condemned or commended? Is it deserving of praise or blame? No, so that's because the t-shirt had no choice really. It was the person who wore it who had everything to say about where the t-shirt was going to be going as soon as it went on the body. So likewise, if the mind is nothing other than, or the nature of the mind, the state of the mind, the defining characteristic of the mind is Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana at any given time, is it not their nature that defines your nature? And is it not their identity that defines your identity? So how can that identity be static when it's constantly changing? With the arising and passing away that happens so rapidly, so frequently, that identity keeps changing. So, if you can understand what I'm trying to get across to you here, are you comfortable with introducing yourself by your name? Does that actually capture who you are? If you say, I'm Sam, are you really Sam? Who's Sam? Is Sam a person, or is Sam a label that you have used to identify the characteristic or the nature of the 5 aggregates, or the instance of the 5 aggregates, that particular group of 5 that arose in your mind at that given time? Isn't that what it is more like? Think about a river, for instance, as an example. A river. You could walk up to a river and you could give it a name. You can say this is the Ganges. It's never static though. The moment you point at a river and you start to utter the first syllable to pronounce its name, it's not the same river by the time you have finished it. Why? Because the water is constantly flowing. So, when you start to say the word ga and finish with the syllable is, by the time you've pronounced that word, by the time you've uttered the name of the river has changed so many times. So imagine this, for instance. Let's say it takes you 3 seconds to pronounce the name Ganges. Okay, I know I'm just giving that an arbitrary number just to help you make sense of this, because it's going to be difficult to be talking in milliseconds. So 3 seconds is the time it takes you to say the word Ganges. Now let's say you're stood by the river and someone's asking you, what's this river called? Or what's this river? And then you point your finger, this is called the G. That's the start of the clock starts. 1 second passes by, and now you're on to ng and the ng. So you've said the syllable ga. Now you're on to ng. And then let's say in the duration of the next second, someone puts some colored dust, some kind of dye into the water, which completely changes the color of the water. So it was the color of water, there's no color of water, so it was colorless to begin with. Have you been anywhere near the Ganges, Swami? No answer. Yes, I know. This is just an example. I'm not talking about a polluted river. I'm just talking about, this is an example, right? So you're pointing at colorless water, the river, unpolluted. I'm sure there's lots of Ganges that's unpolluted. So we are stood by that river, we are pointing at it, and the first second passes by, nothing changes. It's still colorless. Okay? So imagine we can actually see the bank. I know you need vivid imagination to understand this example, but let's not get stuck in the details, right? I want to get a point across to you here. Whatever color the water is originally, that's the color you saw when you listened to the first syllable of the word Ganges. Now 1 second passes by, and at the start of the second, This is becoming a very weird example, isn't it? At the start of the second, someone puts some dye into the water. So this is some colored powder, and it starts to, it's dissolved in the water. And now the entire river, or at least the bit that you're pointing at, has changed color. So by the time you say which is the second syllable, it's no longer colorless. Now it's, say it was red, the dye, and now the river is red in color. And now you move on to the last syllable. And what happens then is someone actually puts another colored dye into the water, and this time it's blue or green, right? Green. So initially it was colorless, then it went red, and now it's green. So which one of these is the Ganges? Is it the colorless river, the red river? I don't mean the Red River, which is another river. Terrible choice of example, I know, yes. I'll pick my examples better next time. And then finally the Green River. Okay, so which one of these rivers is the Ganges? Which one of these rivers defines what the Ganges is? Because after all, when someone's looking at the river, there are, he or she would need to have some way to distinguish. That's in other, really, that's why they're asking you a name. They're asking you to name this thing that they're seeing right now, because they saw another river somewhere else, and they're seeing some differences in the way they look. So, for example, they saw the river Yamuna previously, and now they're seeing the Ganges. So, the observer is picking up that there's a distinction between these two. There are differences between these two things. So he wants to be able to name the second river, which is the Ganges he's seeing now. This is why he's asking you, what do you call this? But the thing is, by the time you've finished naming it, it's changed 3 times. Or at least 2 times. Once it was colorless, then it was red, and finally it was green. So question is, which one should the observer remember as being the Ganges? So if he drew a colorless river, when he goes back home and he's describing the Ganges to a friend after he's returned from his voyage, which one is the Ganges? Or he describes the Ganges. How should he describe it? Should he say, I saw a colorless river? Or I saw a river and it was colorless. The water in it was colorless, and that's the Ganges. Or should he say, I saw a river, the water was red, that's the Ganges? Or should he be saying, I saw a river and the water was green, and that's the Ganges? Which one's the Ganges? Which one? Are there 3 different rivers? Is it the same river? If it's 3 different rivers, then why the same name? At least it should be called Ganges the first, second, and third, or Ganges the red, or Ganges the green. Ganges, not Gandalf. So why you'd need 3 different names if it were 3 different things? But if it's the same thing, then how come it had a different color? At every point of time, you took an observation. So which one is the Ganges? Now my question is, would you be comfortable naming the Ganges based on what you're observing at this given moment in time? So say you're looking at the colorless water, and then someone comes and asks you, what do you call this river? You look at the river to point your finger at it, and at that moment in time you see that the water has been dyed red. Would you be comfortable naming this the Ganges, knowing that When this person walks away, he's going to walk away thinking that the Ganges is a red river. Or would you be comfortable naming it the Ganges? When you look at it and you point your finger at it to name it, and it's green, and then you talk to the person and say, this is the Ganges, but you know now that he's going to walk away thinking that the Ganges is a green river. Are you beginning to understand that the name that you're using is not representative of what it is? It does not represent what it is. You can't introduce Ganges as a red river or a green river or a colorless river, because what the Ganges is whatever the water is at the point you observe it. At the point in time when you take your observation, that is what the Ganges is, if you really wanted to be precise with your answer. Now how about when you introduce yourself? How would you introduce yourself? You introduce yourself, either to somebody else, or when you take a moment to think about yourself. This is where we started, right? You take a moment to think about yourself. Do you not feel like you are an everlasting entity? I was, I am, and therefore I will be. When you think about yourself, is it who you were? Is it who you are? Or is it who you will be? When you introduce yourself to someone, do you pause your mind and say, hold, whatever Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana is in my mind at this moment in time, hold. Someone asks, so who are you? By the look of it, looks like a red rose. Which can be smelt. It's called a rose. It's red in color. After all, it's the 5 aggregates which constantly keep passing through your mind. So when you introduce yourself, when you think about yourself, what else are you thinking about than taking a temperature? It's like getting a temperature check on your mind. Whereas the thermometer will read your temperature, what I'm asking you to do is, if you can take stock of your mind at any given moment in time, now you need to be talking about it in terms of the 5 aggregates. How else could you define the mind? How else could you give it an identity? What is it? What does it mean to call yourself Sam? What does it mean to call yourself Greg or Richard? What does it mean? When you say I'm Sam, where's the Sam? Which bit of you is Sam? For instance, someone asks, right, what does chocolate taste? You can say sweet, because no matter where you taste a chocolate, it's going to be sweet. Or someone asks you, what does lime taste like? It tastes like lime. It's a taste. The taste of lime. It tastes limey. Right? It's everywhere. No matter where you taste it, it's going to be the same taste. Now, when you say I'm Sam, which bit of you is Sam? Clearly, it's not in the physical. No aspect of you is Sam physically. If that were the case, if an organ were to be replaced, then you'd be less Sam now than you were before. Or if actually you donated one of your kidneys, for instance, to somebody else, say to Peter, now he'd need to be called Peter Sam. Because he's now got part of Sam in him. If that is Sam, or at least that's a part of Sam. No, Peter still feels like he's Peter. He doesn't feel like he's part Peter, part Sam, just because he's got Sam's kidney. So, clearly, Sam is nothing to do with this body. So this is where what we talked about last time when I asked you who's on the chair, right? I said let's focus for the time being on the physical, the body. So today I'm taking the next step, which is why I said if you hadn't listened to that sermon, you'll struggle with this sermon. So no part of your physical presence is Sam. I think you all get that. And besides, if that were the case, then all of rebirth will just not work. Rebirth would be impossible. We'd have to throw away the whole concept of rebirth if your body is you. Because when you're dead, you leave this body behind and you move on. So your body can't be you. Right? So we've already established that. That's what we talked about in the previous sermons. So I'm not going to linger any more around that particular topic. But how do you introduce... So what's left then is your mind. Your part body, part mind, right? So once the body aspect you've already discounted, what's left is the mind. Now, and if the mind is simply, it's like the river in which the water keeps flowing, and you can at no point your finger at a river and go, this river is called whatever. The river that you pointed your finger at is no longer the same river you're pointing your finger at now. So actually you name that river Ganges, that's history. It's no longer called Ganges because now you have some new water. It's not the same water as before. So are you beginning to get a sense at least that this naming is simply a convention? So should we stop naming the Ganges and just call it river? No, because then you'd be stuck with, well, what's a river? This is a river. I'm saying let's continue to call it the Ganges, but let's realize that it's simply a naming convention that we have used to represent something that is in a constant state of flux. It is for our convention, it's for our convenience that we use this name. is to keep a sane mind. Otherwise, you'd never be able to name anything. Because no matter what you give a name to, the moment you finish naming it, it's no longer what you started to name. So when you say you're Sam, who's Sam? Which bit of you is Sam? We know now it's not the body. So you're going to have to turn to the mind now, because that's all that's left. And in the mind, all we see is like a river, the 5 aggregates just continue to flow incessantly. So which 5 are you going to be naming Sam now? Because all of the 5 aggregates, they'll all be instances of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana. And they're in a constant state of flux, constantly changing, constantly arising and passing away. It's changing as it arises. So there's a subtle point there. The change is not it arising, not only it arising, but it's changing as it arises. And it's changing as it passes away. So the changing is not just the passing away, but it's changing as it passes away. If you didn't get that, let it go. So, instances of the 5 aggregates arise and pass away. How are you going to name an instance and give it a label? And besides, the rupa, right, which comes as a vipaka. I mean, the rest, all of them do. Let's just take the rupa for instance. They all originate as a vipaka. In taking, for example, an object that comes into contact with the eye. So now you have rupa. And when a sound comes into contact with the ear, you have sabda rupa, gandha rupa, rasa rupa, sparsha rupa, dhamma rupa, and so on. But which rupa is Sam? Let me give you an example just to help break this down further. Say you're watching a movie. You're sat on a comfortable seat, you're in front of your television, say at home, and you're watching something on TV, or you're watching a film, right? Now, through your eyes, you're seeing something. What you're seeing, is that Sam? So whatever you're seeing with your eyes. Now, you know, of course, that what your eyes see is not necessarily what your mind sees, right? This is all, that's stuff we've talked about long time ago. That the rupa on the outside is not the same as the rupa on the inside. Right? So whatever your mind is now sensing as what you're seeing, which bit of that is Sam? So if you're watching a film, which bit of the film or the TV that it's being played on or the air, the space that's between the TV and your eye, which bit of that is Sam? It obviously makes no sense, the question in itself, because none of that is Sam that you get, right? Then you have the Vedana, which is a sensation. It is sensing the fact that the eye has picked up something. It's like a notification. Something's going on. So which bit of that is Sam? Is that Sam? The sensation that the eye is looking at something. The sensation that the eye is picking up sight. Is that Sam? Clearly that makes no sense either. Then there's the identification, the recognition. You're watching an actor or an actress that you know. First of all, of course, you know it's a human being. You also know that it's a film that you're watching. You know you're looking at a TV set. You know you're in your living room because you can see the surrounding environment. Right? Which bit of that is Sam? Okay, if I ask you now get up from your seat and go and point at Sam for me. Where would you go? Because you're clearly looking at something. You're watching a movie. You can see it being played on a TV set. It's on a TV stand. It's which is on the floor, and there's a carpet just above there. Then there's a window by the side. It's against a wall. Can you point at Sam for me? So none of the rupas is Sam. Then what about the sensation that you are seeing this? Your eye is picking up sights. Each sight element is registering on your mind. Each of those registrations, each of those notifications, which of that is Sam? Which of they are Sam? I know it makes no sense. So why do you call yourself Sam? Why do you, when you think about yourself, why do you think that I am Sam? Where's the Sam you're thinking about? You know, it's almost like, say your name is Sam, and I ask you to think of yourself as being Tom. That feels so awkward, does it not? If I were to ask you to think that you are Tom, and your name is really Sam, does that not feel awkward? So I'm saying, when you talk about yourself in using the name that was given to you, so the name that you go by, Sam, at some point you're going to feel awkward about that. It just doesn't feel right, because you begin to wonder which bit of what I'm trying to identify here is Sam. No part of the body is Sam, so then it has to be the mind. So now we are analyzing the mind here by breaking it up into its constituent elements. Each, the chittas that pass through the mind. Where's Sam then? So it's not in Rupa, it's not in Vedana. Then which bit of the identification that you have given to the Rupa that came into your mind is Sam? Then there's Sankara, which can either be considered as the activity that is required to put the chitta together, or it can be the verb noun that is used to describe what rupa that you have just seen, or what rupa has just registered on the mind. So that's Sankara. Now you're watching a film. Which bit of the Sankara that's happening right now is Sam? When the Buddha speaks about the four ultimate truths, he talks about Chitta, Taitasika, Rupa and Nibbana. Thoughts, mental factors, form and Nibbana. If any of you have done any Abhidhamma study, did you ever find the word Sam in those books? Yes, sometimes it says Samsara. No, that's not the same Sam. I'm talking about the person you're trying to name here. Who are you trying to identify? What are you trying to identify after all? And then finally you move on to Vijnana. Which is perception, either the activity of it or the object which allows you to do that. Remember, there are two ways you can identify anything, almost anything in this world. A bottle is either something that has a body and a cap on top, or it's something that carries water. Either way you can identify a bottle, right? So likewise, you can either describe something by what it can be used to do or by its nature, by the characteristics that it possesses. So Vijnana then. Which Vijnana or which part of Vijnana is Sam? Where's Sam in the Vijnana? Still looking for it? You're still looking for the person you have been calling yourself all your life. Once you understand this, folks, I tell you, you're going to begin to realize that this is just a convention. It's just a convention. And conventions are just a necessity for existence. Where there is no existence, you don't need conventions. Conventions are for convenience. And convenience are for that which is in existence. If something doesn't exist, why do you need convenience? So when you're able to understand this in that light, you know how some people get so offended when their names are mispronounced? You're going to stop feeling that way. Because, after all, if you have some way of naming something and that is also for the purpose of convenience, are you not inconveniencing yourself by taking offense to your name being mispronounced? Can you see the irony there? I have a name, it's for convenience. But if someone mispronounces it, I find that very inconvenient. So what was the name for in the first place? Convenience. What's happening right now? Inconvenience. Wrong end of the stick. You need convenience for the purpose of existence. Where there is no existence, you don't need convenience. So where existence is synonymous with suffering, then really, you just need a name to point at something that's suffering. You only need names for as long as suffering exists. Because that which is not suffering does not exist. That's why I said there are only two types of people in this world. There are those who suffer and there are those who know that they suffer. Those who don't suffer, they don't need a name. Why? Because they don't exist. You don't need conveniences when you don't exist. So which part of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, the aggregates which pass through your mind, is Sam again? Where's Sam? You want some time? Take all the time in the world. That's all the time there is. Time's only there where there's a world. I digress. Let's come back to what I was talking about before. I don't want to confuse you even more. So, where's Sam? So your body is not Sam, and the aggregates which pass through your mind are not Sam. Then what's Sam? Is that not the more appropriate question than saying, who's Sam? Again, please remember that this is only for your understanding. We need to live within convention, but we need to understand the ultimate truths. Don't try to live the ultimate truths. So don't walk into a room next time and ask, what's Sam? But that's only a convention. Okay, so who's Sam then? Come on, who's Sam? Is it the Rupa, the Vedana, the Sanya, the Sankara, or the Vijnana? Which one's the Sam? Because remember, when the moment you call Sam, I am Sam, that the five aggregates that was present in the mind at that moment, they passed away. In fact, when you started to say I am Sir, to pronounce the name Sam, 100 billion of them passed by. Then he said another 100 billion passed by. Then he said another 100 billion passed by, and he finally said and then another 100 billion passed by. 500 billion sets of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana passed by. Which one of them is Sam? Are they all Sam? Okay, show me the Sam in them. If you can point Sam in them, you must be able to point at the Tripitaka and show me Sam in it. Because then the Buddha would have said, right, these Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, when it comes together, that's Sam for you. And then this 5, that's Peter for you. And then this 5, that's Stacy. This one's Natasha, right? So the Buddha would have taken the trouble to point that out to us. I'm sure he would have done. But he didn't. Because when he talks about the ultimate truths, when he talks about Chittas, Chaitasikas, Rupas, and he talks about Nibbana, there is no room for Sam there because Sam never existed. doesn't exist, and never will exist. That's simply a convention that is used to refer to aggregates. These are collections. So how can you now take offense if someone mispronounces your name? People get so offended. You can see why now. Do you remember when we talked about who's on the chair? Why do people get offended when they get, racial slurs, for instance? You don't need me to pronounce them on the sermon, but you know what I'm talking about. Why does someone get offended when they're called shorty, or fatty, or ugly? It's because they believe that they are their bodies. We've moved on from there now, haven't we? So then you're left with a name, and you need something to name it. You need something to name. You're left with a name. Now you have a name, but you can't give it to your body. Now you're left with a name, and you need to attribute it to something. What's left is the mind. Then we went through the Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, the 5 that you spend most of your time with, right? And now we're trying to find Sam in all of these. And again, it's not to be found. We've hit a brick wall. So where's Sam? So why do you take offense then, when your name is mispronounced? Not only the name, gosh, people get offended if they're a doctor and they get called Mr. You're not like that though, are you? That's just ignorance abundance. Ignorance abundance. It is indeed. Because they think that they are a doctor. Where's the day for there to be a doctor? Is it which part of the body? Okay, if not the body, which part of the mind? So then what's the big fuss about? Do you see how people are so extremely ignorant? Nothing against people, everything against ignorance. In this game we are all for one and one for all. We should all get together against ignorance. And the problem we all have is ignorance. You must spot ignorance. Remember, there are only 2 types of people in this world, so the next person you come across is one of these 2 types of people. They're either someone who's suffering, or there's someone who knows they're suffering. So if a guy actually does come up to you and you say, hi mister, he says, no, I'm doctor. Just recognize that this is someone who does not know that they're suffering. And be all the more kind to them. Be gentle. They've got very brittle minds. You might just shatter it if you don't call them doctor. So be gentle, be kind to them. I mean, seriously, when was the last time someone introduced themselves by their name but followed by the fact that they're a barber? People say, I'm Dr. So-and-so. They never said, I'm Barber so-and-so. Oh, I'm shopkeeper. I'm laborer. I'm teacher. Oh no, but they do say I'm professor. Really, shouldn't your majesty be replaced by your ignorancy? Again, I don't mean conventionally. Let's stick to the convention, lest we get beheaded. But in an ultimate sense, we need to break through the veil of ignorance. We need to be able to examine these things which seem superficially true, but soon after you start to examine under the covers, it's all a lie, it's all a fallacy. It's all just ignorance, a big fat lie. So where's Sam? Found Sam yet? Okay, so whatever name you've been given, what name is that again? Okay, whatever name that is, where's that guy? Which bit? Is it what you see in the mirror? That we know it's not. So is it the mind? So when you take a moment and think about yourself, that presence that you feel, that I am, the feeling of I am? Not I am anything, I just am, I am. You know this feeling, right? The feeling of I am. The feeling of being present. The feeling of I am. It's not about the I'm thin, I'm short, I'm ugly, I'm pretty, I'm big, I'm rich, I'm none of that stuff. I'm just talking about the I am in its purest sense. Isn't that what you give a name to? You had lots of I ams in your life. All the specializations of I am. But your name stayed the same. It's the who you feel. But then, is there a who to be felt is what I'm asking you to think about. If it's not the body, it has to be the mind. If it's not the mind, then what has it got to be? Think. If it's not the body, it's got to be the mind, because there's nothing else, right? So if it's not the body, then what else has it got to be? What do you call something that does not exist? Then what do you call thinking that something exists when it does not exist? So where's Sam? So where's this person that you feel? Where's the I in the am? Where's the I that is am? The truth is, it's not I am, it's not I am. Clearly, you've got to realize that when you're trying to find this thing that you're feeling, you need to attribute it to something. Here's how I feel this way, right? You've got to be able to say that. Here's how I feel this way. Like if you feel, if you feel an itch on your arm, you look and then you either see a rash, or maybe if you feel a sting, then you look and you see a mosquito. Now you're able to identify why and how you feel that way, the way you feel. Because these things, these sensations are real. So when you chase the mosquito, you're not going to feel the sting anymore. If you treat the rash, you're not going to feel the scratch anymore, or the itch anymore. So you are able to attribute it to something and then fix it if you need to fix it. Now I'm saying is, whether we decide to fix it or not, first let's find where this am comes from. This I am comes from. Where does it come from? What does it originate in? What's causing me to feel that I am? Why do I feel I am? How do I feel I am? It's not the body. No, it's not the body. Of course we know that now. Is it the mind? That's what we discussed. Is it the Rupa, the Vedana, the Sanya, the Sankara, the Vijnana? None of them. So, what is it? Where does it come from? How does it originate? You know, it's a funny feeling, isn't it? You've always felt it, but when you try to look for it, it can't be found. Does that not feel odd? You've always felt it. Throughout your life, there's never been a moment when you haven't felt I am. Yes or no? And now you're trying to find it, you're trying to locate it. You're trying to find out, where does it originate? Where is it? Where are its roots? Where's this guy that I've been feeling all along? Where's this person I've been feeling all along? Where's that somebody? Now you're looking for somewhere to locate it, to find it, and you can't, it's not nowhere to be seen. If something or someone's there, it's got to be somewhere. I mean, that there has to be somewhere, right? If someone says he's over there, your next question is, where? So I am. Where? Where? Do you not feel that this is an imaginary person? Like how some people complain that they've got a voice in the back of their heads, and sometimes they talk with them. There are people who complain about that. It's like there's always another voice in the back of their heads, and you want to do something, but that voice says do something else. You want to sit, it says no, stand. I believe they've identified that as a clinical mental condition. How about this one? This person that you feel, where is he? If it's a he, then he needs to have all the attributes of a he. He needs to look like a he needs to talk like a he needs to do everything like a he. If it's a she, then she needs to look like a she. She needs to do the things that she does. The most basic qualification to be either a he or she is either of them has to be there somewhere. Someone says he. You say who? They say he. You say he who? He. And you go, where? Now you don't have an answer. This is good stuff for a knock-knock joke. Knock-knock, who's there? I who? That will be the end of that. The best you can try is knock knock. Yeah, who's there? I who am not there. So I who's not there. That's who you've been looking for. If I am, then I am where? If you feel something but it's not nowhere to be found, are you not feeling something that does not exist? Isn't that when they take you to a doctor for treatment? You feel something, it's not there. Have you not seen people that they'll talk away as if they're talking to somebody, but there's no one physically around them. You take them to the doctor, don't you? So now you're talking about an I that's am, and I'm asking you where. You can't find where it is, but you're still saying that you're adamant. But I am. Well, where? Don't know. Where should we take you? If something does not exist, but you feel that it exists, or you think that it exists, that is ignorance. The converse is also true. If something exists, and you think or feel that it does not exist, that is also ignorance. In this situation, we have both. Really what's happening is, that which exists, you cannot see. That which you are seeing does not exist. That's a riddle for you. Go and crack it, and I'll talk to you next week. Is that fair? I think that's fair. Who said understanding the Dhamma makes you more gentle and kind? It makes you wicked. I feel like leaving you with that. So here's the riddle again. That which you can see does not exist. And that which you don't see is what exists. You up for a challenge? we'll pick up next week. Okay. Right, so then on that note, let's take a moment to transfer the merits and conclude the sermon. No, I'm serious. I want you to think about it. I've given you enough material to think about it. This is enough material to ponder over it. And I've boiled it down to that which you can see does not exist. That which you cannot see does exist. Or you can also say, that which exists, you cannot see. That which you see does not exist. That's a fine riddle. You won't work it out. We'll pick up on that next Sunday. Okay, so let's take a moment then to transfer the merits that we have all acquired. And we will close the sermon. Okay. Let us all take a moment then to transfer the merits that we have all acquired by making offerings to the infinite virtues of the Noble Triple Gem, chanting Pirit, listening to the Dhamma and engaging in the various meritorious deeds. First and foremost, let us remind ourselves how incredibly fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Lord Buddha's teaching, and with immense gratitude let us transfer these merits to the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas who since time immemorial have protected and preserved the sublime teachings of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations of the noble lineage in the form of the Tripitaka, which is thankfully available to us today to study, understand and comprehend the Dhamma. Let us also transfer the merits we have acquired to all the members of the Mahasangha present throughout the world, including the chief prelates of all the chapters who have dedicated their lives to the noble path and have committed themselves towards the betterment of all sentient beings. Let us not forget that among them are the monks and nuns resident in your local temples and nunneries who have always been by your side. Through thick and thin, come rain or shine, let us also transfer these merits to Guru Swami Nuhanse and all the other monks resident at this monastery, as well as the Anagarikas and the Anagarikas attached to the monastery. Let us also take a moment to transfer these merits and express our gratitude to those who make great efforts to disseminate the teachings of the Buddha, be that by transliterating these sermons, sharing them out with others or inviting others to join them. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in the Woeful plane, they redeem themselves and be born in the Blissful plane. And may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer the merits we have acquired to our devotees, friends of the monastery, who for the sake of merits continue to sustain the Mahasangha. This includes everyone from those of you who have contributed to the construction of the monastery to those of you who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, alms, robes and medicines, as well as those who have passed on their know-how and extend their wishes. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our mothers, fathers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews and nieces, our elders, friends and acquaintances, employees, employees, and to all those who have helped us, supported us, assisted us in any way, shape or form. By the power of these merits, may they be healed of any physical and mental ailments and overcome any obstacles to their spiritual progress. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deed, fulfill the meritorious deed, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transmit to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, primarily the Sakadeva, as well as all the numerous gods and deities who are committed to protect and fulfill the Sambuddha Shasana. Let us also transmit to our guardian deities who keep a watchful eye over us and keep us out of harm's way. May through the power of these merits they prosper in divine power and wisdom, and may they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transmit to our ancestors who have predeceased us, to all those who have been our families, friends and acquaintances in this infinitely long journey in Samsara, and who have helped us, supported us, assisted us in any way they could. Let us transfer their merits to them. Let us also transmit to the members of the armed forces as well as the police force who have sacrificed their lives on numerous occasions to protect the peace and harmony of our nation. May all who have lost their lives in the war, be their friend or foe, rejoice in the merits we have acquired today. Let us also transmit to all those who have lost their lives in natural calamities such as the tsunamis, earthquakes, landslides, as well as the recent pandemics, reminding ourselves that among them will be those who have been friends and family to us in this long journey in samsara. Let us take a moment to transmit merits to them, and may through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Finally, let us all resolve that may through the power and blessings of all the merits we have acquired throughout the day, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of arahants on this blessed land and in our very lives itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all the merits we have acquired today, you and I and everyone who has helped make this program a success become an Arahatun Mahanse or an Arahat Mehin Mahanse in this very life and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. Raga ginnen nidatva, Desha ginnen nidatva, Moha ginnen nidatva, Nibbana parama sukhayan, Sukhita taravatva, Nibbana parama sukhayan, Sukhita taravatva, Mamada siyalu loka, siyalu satvayo, Nibbana parama sukhayan, Sukhita taravatva, Nibbana parama sukhayan, Sukhita taravatva, Nibbana parama sukhayan, Sukhita taravatva. Raga gini niveva, Desha gini niveva, Moha gini niveva, Nivan sapala deva, Nivan sapala deva, Nivan sapala deva. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all forever. We will now conclude the sermon. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all.